Next time on Nature, we're going to the other side of the Earth, to the world's largest island, Australia, where some of the oddest creatures live. We'll explore how these strange animals live and how they came to be when an extraordinary six-part journey into the nature of Australia, the island continent, begins with a separate creation, next time on Nature.
Watch Nature Sunday evening, tomorrow at 8 o'clock. This is Channel 2 Boston. Local broadcast of Julia Child and Company is made possible by our members in partnership with the Victor Company Realtors, serving the residential real estate market in the Merrimack Valley, with offices in Andover, Boxford, Haverhill, Methuen, and Topsfield. With the Johnny Kane Company, makers of all-natural Kane's mayonnaise. And with Welch's, makers of fine products from fruit since 1869, like Welch's Squeezables, jellies, jams, and preserves. From Welch's, America's Fruit Basket.
Funding for this program is provided by this station and by other public television stations.
Welcome. I'm Julia Child. I'm getting ready for a great big kitchen cocktail party. I'm going to have it right here in this room. And I don't like to make a lot of little itsy-bitsy cannabis and stuff like that. So I'm going to do a beautiful gravlax, a dilled salmon in the Norwegian manner. Then I'm going to make a great puffy ham tart made out of French puff pastry. But the puff pastry is made in a revolutionary, new, fast way. And it's a really great way to make it. And then, of course, we're going to have the usual hard-boiled eggs, chicken wings, mini meatballs, oysters, clams, and peanuts, and red wine and white wine. And I'm going to make for you today the fish and the ham tart, and I'm starting out on the fish here. And this is a center cut of salmon, about 2.5 to 3 pounds, and anytime you get fish, feel along it and see if there are any bones in. And look at that bone. And I've got all those a number of bones out of this area, so feel it with your finger. And then I'm going to turn this into gravlax, which means it's a salmon that is cured with salt and dill and cognac. And it's done a great deal in Scandinavia, and we had it when we were in Norway. And it's raw salmon, but the salt cooks it, and it gets the most delicious flavor. It's a little bit like, it's like smoked salmon, but it's even more delicate and delicious, and it's terribly easy to make. All you need to do is to have the wherewithal to buy the salmon. And first you have a mixture of, for 5 pounds you want 2.5 tablespoons of salt and 1.25 tablespoons of sugar. And you have the sugar in because the salt toughens the salmon and the sugar softens it. And put that on the skin side of the salmon, rub that in nicely. And then in Norway you'd have fresh dill, but my dill is rather sad, so rather than using fresh, I can put some of that in. I'm going to use some dried dill weed, and be sure that you smell it and make sure that it's nice and fragrant, and it usually is. And for this 5-pound salmon, you would want about 1.5 tablespoons of dill, all told. And then you want a little bit of cognac, and I have the other side of the fillet in here. There's the skin side, and I have a little cognac there and a little salt and dill. So I'm going to put a little cognac on here, and when you want drops, just put your thumb over the bottle and shake it. For this amount, you probably want 2 or 3 tablespoons of cognac in all. And there, you notice the salmon has a thin side and a thick side. So there's the thin side here, so I'm going to put the thick side against the thin and the thin against the thick to even it off a little bit. And then sprinkle on some more salt mixture on the top of the salmon. And then seeing I have some dill, I'll just stick that in there because it makes a nice, it gives a nice touch to it. And then put on some wax paper, and that's really all there is to it. And I've tried this method with striped bass and with bluefish, and I've sliced it first and then put on the seasonings, and it's been very, very good. I also tried it with sole, but I didn't think it was very good with sole because it was a little mushy. So now after you've done that, all you do is to put it in the refrigerator. And it takes about 4 or 5 days to cure. And after about the 3rd day, taste it and see what it tastes like. And it may need some more salt or cognac or something. But before you put it to rest in the icebox, put on a board, and then I've got a bread pan with a, there you are, as you can see how it looks, a bread pan with a can in it. It's about a 5-pound weight. And that you want to, I always do it if I'm going to do it a week before I want to serve it, so that I'm sure that it's properly cured. And now we have the puff pastry. And this is a piece of puff pastry. It's a cheese puff. And it started out about the height of my finger, and when you bake it in the oven, it swells up like that. And it's all leafy and tender and absolutely delicious. It's really one of the glories of pastry. And how it's made in the classical manner, we've done about 4 or 5 of them. In the classical way, you make a dough circle and you put a big square of butter in it, and then you fold the dough up over it, and then you roll it out and fold it and roll it and fold it. And eventually you get over 600 layers of pastry. But in this new revolutionary way, you do the whole thing together. And I have 6½ sticks of chilled butter cut into big dice. And then I have, in the rest of the bowl here, I have 3 cups of bleached all-purpose flour and 1 cup of unbleached all-purpose flour and 1 cup of bleached cake flour. In other words, it's 25% cake flour. And the reason for that is that anytime you're making puff pastry with American flour, you've got to lower the gluten content of the flour. So that's why you have the cake flour in. And it just doesn't turn out well if you don't. So remember, 3 cups AP flour, 1 cup cake, and 1½ teaspoon salt, and 6½ sticks of butter. And now I'm doing this in the machine because I want to make a large quantity, and it's so much easier. You could do it by hand, but if you do it by hand, I think it's easier to do half the amount and then combine them. And you just rub the butter and the flour between your fingers. But you want to leave the flour in large lumps. It's not as though we were making regular pastry dough. And with this, I'm standing right over it and watching it, and it wants to blend itself but still remain in rather large pieces. I'm going to see how that is. As you can see, some of the butter has been cut up and some of it's remained in quite large lumps. I'm going to give it just a tiny bit more. But it's just a very small amount of mixing. You could also do it in a food processor using half the mixture. And now we want to have 1 cup of iced water. And one of the great secrets of puff pastry is that everything be very cold. And just pour that in. And you just want to get that just so it begins to mass. There. I think that's right. Oh, I've got to get this off. You see how that looks now? You can still see that there's masses of butter. It has massed, in other words. but the butter is still in lumps. And now I'm going to roll it out, but I'm going to roll it out on a pastry marble. And this, if you're going to go into a lot of pastry, get yourself a marble and have it cut to the size of your refrigerator shelf, and then you won't have any trouble with pastry. And to find marble, look up marble in the telephone books or under tombstones, and they'll cut it for you. It'll last you a lifetime, and it's nice and cold. Now out she comes. And if that seems a little bit damp, you can put a little bit of flour on. Actually, the proportion of butter to flour is 5 to 1. So if you were doing it in metrics, it would be 125 grams of flour to 125 grams of butter to 100 grams of flour, which makes 5 to 4. Now that is a little bit damp, and you're going to be amazed at what a terrible mess this looks like. But what you now do is to push it out into a rectangle. Remember to use the heel of your hands, not the palms, and always when you're working with pastry, work very fast. And this rectangle's about 18 long by 8 wide. And you'd think, looking at this, how is she going to make anything out of that mess? But you will see. Then you take a pastry sheet and you're going to fold it in 3. Then put a little bit of flour on top. And then fold the other side over. And that gets a little flour. You can see why the proportion of butter is there's so much butter, because you have to use quite a bit of flour. And flour the bottom of it. And then you're going to make 4 rollings out and foldings up into 3. And if you're doing it in the conventional manner, you can make 2, and then you have to refrigerate things. But I should have put a little more flour on the top of that. But the reason that the butter is in lumps like this is so that it will make layers with the dough every time you roll it out. Now that gets folded in 3 again. Now the other side. Now that's 2 turns that it's had. I think actually I got a little bit more water in than I should have, because I think I didn't. I got a little more than a cup. Well, that doesn't going to make any difference because we're just adding a little more flour. Now we have 2 rolls, and we'd make 2 more, and I think by this time I'll give myself a clean rolling pin. I find I'm a rolling pin freak. I got loads of them. This is an American ball bearing pin, and it's a great one because it does most of the work for you. But now see here, at the beginning of the 3rd turn here, that's beginning to look much more like a dough. I'll turn her over again. Then it just gets 1 more roll and fold, and that's it. But you see, it would be you can do it perfectly well on a board rather than a pastry marble. I don't want to discourage you by saying you have to have all this special equipment, but I think it's useful for you to see the ideal equipment. And I'm flouring it a little bit more, and then rolling her out again, and this is the final roll, and then it'll rest. But you see now that's beginning to be dough, and then it's going to have 2 more rolls after this. There, that's folded over. You see now that's actually dough. Take your fingers and go 2 to show that you made your 2 rolls in case you have to go off somewhere. Then wrap it up and into the fridge. if you don't put the marks on it, then sometimes you forget what you've done. I'm going to put it into the plastic bag and then let it rest for 40 minutes. You want the butter to firm up. And you also want the gluten in the dough to rest. Like an invalid has to rest. Now, after you've done your 2 more rolls, then you roll it out just like a regular pastry dough and cut 2 circles in it. And the 2 circles I have are, look at my hand, are 9 inches in diameter. There's one of them. And there's the other one on a baking sheet. And push it out the way I have there. And this is going to be the bottom layer of the ham tart. You don't want the bottom layer to rise so much. So take either 2 forks or a roller pricker given to us by a friend of mine. And you prick that to keep it from rising. Then you put your filling in. And if you were doing a regular PTVA, it would be an almond cream, but I'm doing a ham mixture. And this looks rather hotted, but it's quite nice. This is sliced ham that has been warmed with butter and shallots. And then thick, then there's a little sauce just made of 2 egg yolks and 1/3 of a cup of cream. And the reason it looks rather hotted at this point is because you have to have it cold when it goes on. And you have to be sure and keep it in a lump. Then I've put 2 or 3 tablespoons of cheese on top. And as you notice, I've put it right in a lump in the middle, leaving it almost 2-inch border there, which is very important because otherwise the filling will spread out. And now I'm painting the bottom layer with water. Then I'm going to stick the top layer on. And what you want to be sure to do here is to be able to, oh, there's my top layer, is to be able to seal it perfectly. So there's your top layer. Pull it out a little bit. And be sure, because you want it to rise properly, that the top layer is at least 1/4 inch thick. Because if it's less than 1/4 inch thick, it may not rise. Then, I'll have a little baby knife. Make a little steam hole in the top. And then very carefully, with your fingers, press all the way around to make sure that it's sealed. And pushing it out a little bit. And then you want to make a scalloped edge all the way around. I'm just going to do just the beginning of this to show you. That won't hurt anything. Then get a bowl or something that's just a little bit less. And you take a little knife and you cut a little V. And then with the back of your knife, you make little marks. Then about 2 inches later, you make another V. And you just continue around to make a little scalloped edge. I'll show you one that's finished in a little while. Just continue right around that way. Don't want to take too much time for you. And then at this point, you want to refrigerate it because you have to chill it before you make your decorations on it. And while you're chilling it, you can do something with the leftovers from where that circle was cut out. You have, I'll show you here. See, that's the piece of dough from where the circle came out. And then you want to paste those pieces together. That's how it begins. Really, my hands are a mess there. Oh, well. Now, take some water and paint it along the edge, and then fit the leftover right along the edge there. And there's another little bit. I'm just doing you a sample so you can see. But the point is that you want the layers to remain horizontal so that they will rise again. And then take a clean rolling pin Here's one. This is just a plastic dowel. That works out very nicely, too. And roll it out. So it's all sealing itself together again. And then to make it a little neater, fold it again in 3. There's always this folding in 3 business. Then roll it out again, and then you can turn it into any kind of puff pastry creation you want. And I'm going to turn this into some cheese appetizers. Rolling it out. I'm going to actually use my great big pin just because it does more work for me. Then, it can be, see, that's a rough shape, but that's okay. I'm going to put 2 groups of cheese in. There's some in the middle, then roll the top over, then put a little more. This is just a mixture of Swiss and cheddar. Then roll that out again. And fold it up again with cheese. Do it a second time. I won't continue with that because you get the idea. But here you are, this one that's been all rolled out nicely with cheese and is ready now to be cut into appetizers, so even up the edges. And you never even throw away a scrap like that, because you can't reconstitute that very well, but you can turn it into a pastry dough and then cut it into strips and cut the strips into pieces. And then they're going to make little appetizers like this. Those are a slightly different shape, but that's all right. These are going to be rather nice fat ones. And then all you do is paint them with egg. And put on a little bit more cheese and bake them. And what you can do, you just put the egg glaze and the cheese on at the last moment before baking, but you can form them and freeze them. I've had some puff pastry that was frozen for 2 years and it was still perfectly fine. So that just shows what you can do with it. And now you put this into a 450-degree oven for about 15 minutes, and you end up with your little puff cheese appetizers. Aren't those nice? If you make them too narrow, they tend to fall over because they rise up and then topple. And so now I'm going to finish the decoration of our ham pithivier. I call it a pithivier because of the round shape, and it's so pretty when it's baked, as you will see. Now I have this one. See, the edges are all scalloped and ready to go. And you can't put on your decoration if the pastry is wet. But what you now do is to glaze it. And this glaze is 1 egg beaten with 1 teaspoon of water. And this is the only good professional glaze, so don't be taken in by other things like evaporated milk and I don't know what all. But if you want a really professional looking glaze, you use your whole egg. And then ideally you let that dry for a minute and then paint it with another coating. And this is just before baking. And then you take a little knife and make any kind of decoration you want. A pithivier has the spokes of a wheel like that. I'm going to do oval ones. And you cut down about 1/16 of an inch, making a little oval design like that. And then, because you've done it in the glaze, and you've cut into it fairly deeply, it makes a lovely raised design. And then do a little cross-hatching around, a little more carefully than I'm doing now, and you're ready to bake it in the oven. And that goes into a 450-degree oven, and you bake it for about 15 to 20 minutes until it's puffed and browned, and then you lower the oven to 350, and you have to bake it about 45 minutes because you've got to cook all those pastry layers. And when it's done, Look what you've got. Isn't that something? You wouldn't believe that that funny, flat thing could turn into this magnificent puff. It really wows them. It always really even wows me every time I see it. So now I got to clean up this kitchen and get ready to turn it into a cocktail lounge. So I'll see you later. There, how about this for a cocktail lounge and free lunch bar? This is my same old kitchen. And here's a stove top. And my husband made this big frame and lined it with plastic, and we got ice in it. And then he made a drain so the ice drains down under the cooktop counter. And so, which I can have a nice oyster and fish bar. Here's some clams, and the only thing is to have someone who knows how to open them. And I just serve lemon with them, which I think is, I don't like cocktail sauce because I think it drowns the taste of them. A few little cherry tomatoes for them that likes rabbit food, along with some fluted mushrooms, you've seen me do that, and some more raw rabbit food, because that's what some people like who are on a diet. And then we have these cute little radishes with just a little bit of sweet butter in them. And here's some beautiful Long Island oysters all ready to be eaten. And then here is our great piece of gravlax, the dilled salmon. And it's on a display here because I've cut some more that's ready to be served, and then this can be cut after everyone has admired the display. And then the cheese appetizers. I know we discussed that you can do the pastry and assemble them months ahead even, but I think they're much best when just cooked just before serving. And here we have hard-boiled eggs, very prettily arranged also with a pastry bag. And I certainly think for something like this, you want to learn how to use the pastry bag, which isn't very difficult. And then we have, I told you that you could do dilled other fish than salmon, and this is dilled sea bass, and it's just delicious. And here are the dilled salmon already cut, and there's some more hard-boiled eggs, and here's some pumpernickel bread that you spread with butter and put your dilled sliced fish on. And then here we have Peking wings. These are chicken wings that were marinated with lemon and soy and fresh ginger and a little wine for several hours, and then drained and sautéed and then simmered with the soy sauce and the wine. And they're absolutely delicious, and they're good either hot or cold. It's one thing also that's good just as well on a picnic, because you can take them along cold. And I think people like something a little hearty, and then of course some people don't like all the fish that we've got. And then here are some mini meatballs. And this is hamburger with some nice seasonings in it and a little bit of sausage meat. And then here are our great ham tarts, our ham PTVA. And I'm going to cut you one. You want to use a serrated knife, but you can hear that sort of crinkle crunch as you cut it. Those are those layers being cut through. And there you are. You can see a little bit of ham layer in there. And you can see that also that you wouldn't want to, you have to be very careful that it's fully sealed together so it'll rise up and look absolutely beautiful. And so I think I'd better split and get dressed because my guests are coming any minute. So bon appetit and come to my party.
Stay with us now because springtime's at its best in New Zealand next on the Victory Garden, followed by more good cooking with Jeff Smith, the Frugal Gourmet at 5.
Julia Child is author of the book Julia Child and Company.